Fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour to 4 o'clock. Boris Johnson was grilled by Sir Keir Starmer at PMQs today on the cost of living crisis. Welcome reaction to this and all the big political stories of the week. Also, a new report has found the rural economy is 18% less productive than the national average. Are the Conservatives in danger of losing their voters in the rural heartlands? And Germany's performed yet another policy U-turn and said it will provide Ukraine with lethal aid. We'll get the latest from Berlin and indeed the latest on the war in Ukraine. And as always, do get in touch with all your views. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. All that and so much more in the next hour between 3 and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Labour has accused the Prime Minister of having his head in the sand over the cost of living crisis. In the final Prime Minister's questions before the local government elections, Sir Keir Starmer said Boris Johnson is failing to manage the economy. As the hike in national insurance takes effect, Sir Keir said millions of people will look at their payslip this week and see Boris Johnson's fingerprints all over it.
He pretends the economy is booming, but where there are problems, they're global. But in the real world, our growth is set to be slower than every G20 country except one, Russia. And our inflation is going to be double the rest of the G7. Does he think that denying the facts, staring him in the face, makes things better or worse?
Well, the Prime Minister responded by defending his record.
We will return to being the fastest by 2024 and the fastest in 2025, Mr. Speaker. That's what the IMS forecasts say. He asks about, read it. He asks about working people, Mr. Speaker. This is the government, this is the party that supports working people. Unlike them, with the biggest increase, yes, I'll tell you what's going up. The living wage is going up, Mr. Speaker, by record amounts. Employment is going up, Mr. Speaker, by record amounts.
The Prime Minister has apologised to those who lost loved ones in care homes at the start of the pandemic. It's after the High Court ruled today that government policies to discharge patients from hospital to care homes were unlawful. The case was brought forward by two women whose fathers died from COVID-19 in 2020. Boris Johnson says that at the time, the government didn't know that COVID could be transmitted asymptomatically. More than 200 MPs have been sanctioned by Russia. The Prime Minister says they should regard that as a badge of honour. The move comes ahead of a major speech by the Foreign Secretary who'll urge allies today to send tanks and warplanes to Ukraine. Liz Truss will warn that the West must prepare for the long haul to ensure Russia is defeated. She'll also call for tougher economic sanctions to further isolate Russia, including cutting off oil and gas imports once and for all. Russia's being accused of blackmail after Gazprom halted gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria because both countries are refusing to pay in rubles. The state-controlled pipeline supplies Europe with about 40% of its gas needs, with the transit between Poland and Bulgaria feeding into Germany, Hungary and Serbia. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the Russian move, though, will backfire.
The move that Russia did today is basically a move where Russia hurts itself. The Kremlin is hurting the Russian economy because they are cutting off themselves from important revenues.
The Chief Whip is investigating claims that a Tory MP has been caught watching pornography on his mobile phone in the Commons. It's after several newspapers reported that the allegations were raised during a meeting of Conservative MPs. 56 members of Parliament, including 3 cabinet ministers, have also reportedly been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievances scheme over allegations of sexual misconduct. 5 Metropolitan Police officers are going to face a disciplinary panel over the stop and search of 2 black Olympic athletes.
Wait, he didn't do anything! No.
Bianca Williams and Ricardo dos Santos were stopped in West London while driving with their baby son in the car. Both were handcuffed and searched, leading to accusations of racial profiling. Releasing a statement, Bianca Williams said a clear focus on the racism problem within the Met is long overdue. The Transport Secretary says the P&O Ferries boss's refusal to resign is unsustainable and that he has to go. His comments were made as P&O resumes freight services between Dover and Calais after sacking nearly 800 workers last month. Well, Grant Shapps told MPs the company will have to pay its new staff minimum wage when new legislation is introduced.
It's completely unsustainable to have the head of the P&O, the boss, Peter Hebblethwaite, who came to a committee room like this and openly and deliberately explained how he sought to avoid the law, to break the law. He actually said that was his intention and that he would do it again to remain in the post of leading that company. He will have to go.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radios. Very good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday. Well, in the last couple of hours, we've, of course, had Prime Minister's question time, but the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, attacked the Prime Minister on the cost of living crisis and accused Boris Johnson of failing to act to protect people across the country. Pretty fiery PMQs, lots of cheering on both sides. You can tell we're in election mode. Let's go to Westminster, join our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's outside Parliament. Tom, good afternoon to you. It's fair to say, isn't it, to a large degree, this is very tricky territory for the Prime Minister. There's a sense inside and outside the Conservative Party, even within government, that, frankly, they should probably be doing more.
Yes, certainly tricky territory for the Prime Minister. A wise decision for the Leader of the Opposition to go in so heavily on the cost of living crisis. What can the Prime Minister say? Either he says, look, what we're doing to help, in which case he seems out of touch because so many people in the country are struggling, or he tries to explain the situation of the worldwide inflation, the COVID pandemic, the war, and he'll look like he isn't doing enough if he just explains what's wrong. It's very tricky territory for any incumbent to try and address. So really what was happening in the first few questions there was a Prime Minister slightly on the back foot. However, I have to say by the end of the exchange, the ball was very much in Boris Johnson's court when it came to getting back into campaign mode. And we really did hear a local election campaign pitch from the Prime Minister again and again today, pointing to Labour councils, for example, that went bankrupt or that have been spending lots of money buying EU flags or energy companies or whatever else it might be. When the Prime Minister was going in on campaign mode, he really did seem to be much more sure of himself, back finding his feet, and of course the support behind him was more than we have seen in recent weeks as well. This in many ways was a more ordinary Prime Minister's questions, back to the bread and butter Punch and Judy that we came to know before Partygate.
Yeah, quite extraordinary, isn't it? It felt like that to me as well, Tom. Away from COVID after 2 years, less agreement, of course. When we look at what's happened with Ukraine, it felt that we're very much back to domestic issues, and big domestic issues at that as well. In saying that, the whole session nosed off, didn't it, on Angela Rayner, and the Prime Minister again essentially condemning that story that we saw appearing in the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, the Prime Minister very keen to distance himself from that story, although interestingly, the Mail has today doubled down on that story, saying that they can corroborate the idea that actually, in their reporting, it was Angela Rayner herself who allegedly had made a joke or something similar towards the practice of distracting the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's questions. The Mail on Sunday, or the Mail I should say, today, saying that they have multiple witnesses, at least 3 MPs, telling them that that is what happened. However, clearly the Prime Minister has chosen to steer well clear of it, saying that this is an inappropriate story, that he wants nothing to do with it. And indeed, we heard briefing in previous days as well that the Prime Minister was saying if he discovered whichever MP had briefed it, then he'd come down like a ton of bricks upon that MP. Clearly, this is not comfortable territory for the Prime Minister. It's territory he wants to move off from pretty sharpish.
Yeah, and just very funny, Tom, talking about uncomfortable territory for the Prime Minister for the Conservative Party, though it must be said, of course, this is not just confined the allegations of sexism, misogyny and indeed potentially sexual misconduct to the Conservatives. It's across the board. It involves Labour and others as well. But a report today, a rather extraordinary one, that the Chief Whip, the Conservative Chief Whip, is looking into allegations from a female Conservative minister that a fellow male minister was watching pornography while in the Commons chamber.
Yes, a front bench member of Parliament allegedly on a mobile phone watching pornography. It's the most extraordinary story and one that has raised many questions of great concern in the House of Commons. Of course, responding to a question on this story at Prime Minister's Questions, the Prime Minister said, well, that would indeed, that sort of sexual misconduct, that would be grounds under the Ministerial Code for disciplinary action, for resignation, even from the front bench. Now, Conservative whips are investigating this, we have been told. Number 10 insists they do not know which particular front bencher. Now, that could be a whip, it could be a minister, whoever it might be. Number 10 are saying they do not know, the whips know, and that investigation is ongoing. Clearly a very disturbing situation and one that has shocked many throughout the House.
It looks like the man behind you wants the MP to repent. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed, as always, for joining us there from Westminster. Thank you, Tom. In a moment, we're speaking to Gita Fawkes' Adam Cherry about what happened to PMQs today and lots of other stuff. But first, let's bring you back to what happened in those exchanges between the Leader of the Opposition and indeed Boris Johnson.
This Tory government's had its head in the sand throughout the cost of living crisis. First, they let prices get out of control. Then they denied it was happening. They failed to do anything about it, and then they made it worse with higher taxes. Because of his choices, we are set to have the slowest growth and the highest inflation in the G7. Mr. Speaker, a vote for Labour next week is a vote for a very different set of choices. We would ask oil and gas companies to pay their fair share and reduce energy costs. We wouldn't hammer working people with the worst possible tax at the worst possible time. We'd insulate homes to get bills down. And we'd close the tax avoidance schemes that have helped his Chancellor, where is he, reduce his family's tax bill while putting everyone else's up. That's a proper plan for the economy. So why doesn't he get on with it and finally make choices that make things better, not worse, for working people?
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the right honourable gentleman, I listened to him over many weeks and many years, this guy is doomed to be a permanent spectator, Mr. Speaker, because we have a plan to fix the NHS and fix social care. They have no plan. We have a plan to fix our borders with our deal with Rwanda. They have no plan. We have a plan to take our economy forward. They have no plan. Let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the elections. He talks about the elections in a few days' time, Mr. Speaker. Let me remind him that everywhere you look at Labour administration, it is a bankrupt shambles. Hammersmith Council spent Labour-run Hammersmith spent £27,000 on EU flags, Mr. Speaker, 2 years after the referendum. Labour-run Nottingham Council bankrupt because of their investment in some communist energy plan of the kind that he now favours. He should apologise for it. Labour-run Croydon bankrupt, Mr. Speaker, because of their dodgy property deals. And never forget, Labour-run Britain in 2010, bankrupt because of what the Labour government did.
Well, delighted to say Adam joins us now. Good afternoon, Adam. We're very much in election mode, aren't we? 2 pitches from 2 leaders at the end of PMQs there, ahead of voters going to the polls next week.
Sorry, Dan, I'm afraid the line isn't particularly clear. I can't quite hear what you're saying there.
I'm just saying that we're in election mode.
Yes, we are, absolutely. Well, this is the last PMQs before everyone goes off for the local elections and the Queen's speech. So this was really the final pitch for both sides to hammer home their message ahead of all of that to come next week. They've got about 8 days to go. So, usual punch and judy politics for most of the PMQ session until the end, when they both got their messages across. Vote Labour, vote Conservative, and it was a last ditch effort on both sides to rally the troops, I think.
Do you think it was clever of Labour to go on the cost of living crisis? I mean, it clearly is the big political issue at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's more effective for them to do that than to hammer on this Partygate issue over and over again. I mean, we even heard there were briefings from within the shadow cabinet that Lisa Nandy said this is exactly what they should be doing, because it lands more on the doorstep. People are feeling the pinch in their pocket, and it's more effective to go and to go to the people and say, look, we're on your side. That's their new slogan. That's a deliberate ploy on this topic, and it's more palatable for them.
Let's move on to passports, because we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday, not ruling out, let's put it like that way, the possibility of privatising the passport office. Lots of people, millions of people waiting to get their passports ahead of the summer holidays. In the end, though, he's not going to do that, is he? He's not. Even if he did, it wouldn't sort out the immediate problem.
Yeah, I think this is a case of briefing the papers and then just trying to encourage Passport Office and the DVLA to get their act together. This is a pitch across the whole of Whitehall, so you're seeing this. Jacob Rees-Mogg is obviously making this the central part of his brief to improve, to get civil servants back into the office. It's all part of his efficiency drive, and it's an effective way to encourage that. If you say, look, when you guys aren't in the office, when you're not doing your job properly, people across the country are affected by it. So will he go through with it? Probably not. I mean, that would take a long time and a lot of effort. It's probably a better way of it's akin to posting notes on civil servants' desks saying, "I look forward to seeing you in the office soon." It's more politics than policy, I think.
And just very finally, on these allegations of sexual misconduct, I think the papers at the weekend were suggesting 56, I think it was MPs, are under investigation in some sort or another. And we've got these claims today about a minister or a Conservative frontbencher watching porn in the chamber. Is this an insight into kind of the culture inside the Palace of Westminster and the need for it to change?
I think it's a bit of a wake-up call, yeah. I mean, I don't agree with what's happening in the Speaker's office, hauling journalists in to give them a reprimand. You should really be directing this at the MPs if there's a problem. I do notice around the Parliamentary estate they've now put up posters saying, please keep your hands off each other, which does seem like to speak to a bit of a cultural problem over there. I don't necessarily think this is new, but then again, you could say if that's the case, why is it only emerging now? The stuff about the MP watching porn on the front bench, I mean, I don't think that happens every day, but I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the next couple of days.
Well, yeah, let's hope it doesn't happen every day. Adam, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Adam Cherry there, joining us from Guido Fawkes. OK, you're watching the briefing here on GB News, 19 minutes past 3 o'clock. Coming up in just a couple of minutes. And do get in touch, by the way, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking about the rural economy and how it's lagging behind the rest of the national economy. Neil Parish, Conservative MP, in just a couple of minutes. But first, here's the weather on this Wednesday afternoon.
Hello again, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another dry day for the vast majority tomorrow and another pretty chilly start as well as temperatures overnight tonight again drop down to freezing in places. High pressure is controlling our weather. It's been drifting down from the north, bringing with it cool air, and the winds coming in from the North Sea continuing to feed in quite a lot of cloud across the eastern parts of England in particular. Cloud breaking up a little bit through this evening, so many places having some sunny spells, and as I say, most places will be dry. But then later in the night we could well start to see more cloud coming back across eastern parts of England. That will help to keep the temperatures up, but where we've got clear skies over Scotland, northern England, North Wales, certainly a frost in rural areas. Temperatures could be as low as -3 or -4, down to 2 or 3 degrees in most towns and cities. So a chilly start to Thursday, but again, for many western areas, a dry and a bright day. Lots of cloud again over the Midlands and eastern England, and for some here it could stay fairly gloomy all day. Thicker cloud might just bring 1 or 2 scattered showers over northern Scotland at times, but say most places looking dry with some sunshine in the south and west, 16, 17, Cardiff, Southampton, but under the cloudier skies, Hull and Norwich struggling to get much beyond double digits. During Thursday evening, still 1 or 2 showers over northern Scotland, but for most it's dry, and again we'll see the cloud breaking up to reveal clear spells, so again a touch of frost is possible on Friday morning. And Friday's a similar story, perhaps a bit more cloud over northern and eastern Scotland with 1 or 2 scattered showers, a bit more cloud across southeast England, but for many central and western parts it's dry and fine on Friday with some good spells of sunshine and temperatures responding to that sun. It feels pleasant in the sunshine, with highs in the mid-teens. High pressure continues to dominate into the weekend. Likely to see some showers in the far northwest on Saturday, but still for much of the UK, high pressure will bring fine weather on Saturday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the programme. Now, the rural economy is being held back by a lack of affordable housing, supermarket price wars and poor public transport, along with broadband connections. That's according to a new report. The cross-party group of MPs and peers found that the rural economy was 18% less productive than the national average. If this gap was reduced, it could add £43 billion to UK PLC. The government said it's welcomed the report and that it's providing £2.6 billion to rural areas in the years to come. Well, joining me now is the MP, Conservative MP Neil Parish. He is chair of the DEFRA committee. Neil, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You spelled it out there, haven't you? Lack of affordable housing, lack of public transport and broadband connections. I mean, I would turn around to you and say that, you know, these are issues that effectively have defined the countryside for a very long time.
They have, and I think it's how we work across government to deliver it, because, you know, DEFRA can do a lot on agriculture and environment, but of course it's, you know, it's local government that deal with, and DCLG that deal with planning, for instance. Again, it's digital media and sport that deal with getting broadband out to the whole of the rural areas. So, I mean, much is happening, but I think what we found when we've been doing inquiries into it is making sure across government we recognise the particular challenges for the countryside. You know, people are more spread out. It's always going to be more difficult to create that vibrant economy. We've also got a lack of skills and a lack of companies sometimes for higher skilled people to work in, and then you have a brain drain from the countryside. And of course, the cost of housing compared to the wages, when a lot of it's down to agriculture and tourism, not always the highest wages in the world, and that doesn't drive the economy as fast as we would like.
Hasn't the pandemic in some ways helped this, though, as in that lots of people have, we've been told, moved out of cities into the countryside, even with the broadband connection problems, more people able to work from home in different parts of the country. Has that shifted things at all?
It's helped, and like in our own farmhouse, we have managed to get fibre optic cable into the house, and that was sort of revolutionary when that happened. And I managed to, you know, speak into Parliament and do all these things we did through the pandemic. So what we've got to make sure is that we close that digital divide, because it is an us and them really when it comes to digital connection. And if you are running a holiday business and people try to book up online to come and stay, and they can't do it successfully, they realise that your broadband digital connection is bad, and they don't actually come there to stay with you. So, you know, it has a direct effect as well on business, and, you know, coupled to farmers applying for their rural payments and the like to DEFRA. All of that is essential, and many businesses. And I think if one thing would cure not everything, it would be the digital connection is the biggest of all, along with transport. But I think we realised through the pandemic that we can actually do a lot from home as long as we've got digital connection. And of course, the countryside is a beautiful place to live as well.
Let's just move on if we can, Neil, just because I think your name is on this list of sanctioned MPs from Russia. The Prime Minister says you should wear that as a badge of honour.
Yes, I do very much, because I think Putin's murderous regime needs to be held to account. I was also banned many years ago from Zimbabwe by Mugabe, who didn't like my ideas on his corrupt election, so therefore re-election. So I do wear it as a badge of honour, and I think it's right that we stand up to Russia clearly and to Putin in particular, because it is the Putin regime that is causing the mayhem in Ukraine and the terrible devastation and loss of life.
Do you know what it means? Has anyone told you? Any sense when you've been sanctioned? What have you been sanctioned? What are they doing to you?
Well, I don't have any sort of borrowed money from Russians, and I don't have any business in Russia, so I don't quite know how they're going to sanction me. I imagine whether they've got a picture of me at Moscow airport, if I was to try and fly in there, I very much doubt it, actually. But I think it's more a symbolic process of Russia trying to kick back. But I can assure you, as far as we're concerned as parliamentarians from all sides, I suggest we are all happy to actually be banned from and sanctioned by the Russians, because we do not sanction their behaviour one bit, and it's right for all of us to stand up and now be counted.
And just very finally, Neil, while we've got you on these reports, and we know your chief whip is looking into them from a female minister about another Conservative frontbencher watching pornography on his phone. What's your reaction to that? I mean, it's pretty jaw-dropping, the suggestion that it's happened. I mean, frankly, whoever it is, I mean, surely they would have to have the whip removed, wouldn't they?
I mean, I think the whip's office will do a thorough investigation, and we will wait and see that result. And I think, from that, then the decision will have to be made what action to be taken.
Is there a problem with the culture in Parliament, do you reckon? I mean, it's not just Conservative MPs, we should say, this is a cross-party issue, but there is a sense, I think, for people outside looking in, that there are just a whole range of stories, even this year, involving different MPs, that gives a sense that there's a cultural problem inside Parliament.
I think if you've got sort of 650 members of Parliament in what is, a very sort of very intense area, I mean, you are going to get people that step over the line. I mean, is it, I don't think there's necessarily a huge culture here, but I think it does have to be dealt with seriously. And I think, that's what the whips will do in our whips office.
Neil, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Neil Parrish there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conservative MP and the chair of the DEFRA Select Committee. OK, you're watching GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll talk about the war in Ukraine. Germany now sending lethal weapons. And also, we'll be looking at that GB News exclusive story on UK ambulances being sent to Ukraine to help soldiers on the front line. But before all of that, let's bring you right up to date with the news. Again with Rosie.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It is 3:31. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Sir Keir Starmer has accused Boris Johnson of having his head in the sand over the cost of living crisis. In the final Prime Minister's questions before the local government elections, the Labour leader said Boris Johnson is failing to manage the economy. Well, the Prime Minister defended his record, saying the government has cut taxes for working people. The High Court has ruled that government policies on discharging patients from hospital to care homes at the start of the pandemic were unlawful. The case was brought forward by two women whose fathers died from COVID-19 in 2020. Judges said the regulations failed to take into account the risk to elderly and vulnerable residents from non-symptomatic transmission. Boris Johnson says the hundreds of MPs sanctioned by Russia should regard it as a badge of honour. The retaliatory move from Russia comes ahead of a major speech tonight by the Foreign Secretary, who will urge allies to send tanks and warplanes to Ukraine. Liz Truss will also say the West needs to cut off oil and gas imports once and for all. Well, Russia's being accused of blackmail after Gazprom halted gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria because both countries are refusing to pay in rubles. The state-controlled pipeline supplies Europe with about 40% of its gas needs, with the transit between Poland and Bulgaria feeding into Germany, Hungary and Serbia. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Don't go anywhere. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Darren.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the programme. It is 25 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Wednesday. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radios. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Lots of you getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Ian says, personally, I can understand people watching or wanting to watch porn at the best of times, but to do it in the House of Commons with other MPs beside and behind you who can observe what you're looking at makes their ability to be representing us questionable. Terry says it seems a Labour MP has to be protected by a Conservative PM from the wicked Tory press. I'll never understand the world of politics. Gary says, how are Labour expecting the Conservatives to sort out the cost of living? Answer, getting them to borrow more so they'll have to put up taxes later. How are Labour going to pay back anything they borrow to sort out the economy without sending us to near bankruptcy again? If they know the answer, then please tell me. Vicky says, I'm astounded the issue of porn has been raised by people. No member of Parliament should be watching anything on their phone in the House. It doesn't matter whether it's porn or a catch-up of EastEnders. And finally, Graham says, the House of Pornament, which I think is an attempt at a pun. Do always get in touch, even with your puns. gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Let's move away from the politics of today in this country, and let's talk about Ukraine, because the main supplier of NHS ambulances has suspended normal production, instead carrying out vital work on converting armoured vehicles into ambulances instead for use in the war. The Veneria Group in East Yorkshire has already converted 50 former British military vehicles, with more on the way. Our security editor, Mark White, has this exclusive report.
Inside this vast facility, they're working flat out. A Yorkshire ambulance manufacturer now playing its part in the Ukrainian war effort. But these are no ordinary ambulances. They are specially converted former British military armoured vehicles, providing Ukrainian medics with far better protection in the conflict zone. The company, Venari, normally supplies the vast majority of UK ambulances. But all that's on hold, as everyone here is desperate to help Ukraine.
Something that we've seen on this project, like no other, is that the guys are coming from the homes where they've been watching the news with the war unfolding, And for them and for myself and for all of us, it doesn't seem to be business at the minute. This is personal. And the guys are building with that personal edge to them. They're working through the break times. They're starting an hour earlier without clocking in. They're finishing later with, whilst clocking out before. We're all putting in over and above. It's nothing by comparison to what the Ukrainians are doing on a daily basis.
Less than a month after they started this process, the company has already converted around 50 armoured vehicles into ambulances. The first 15 have now been delivered, driven to the region by Venari staff and handed over to Ukrainian medics.
The Ukrainian authorities tell us they've been losing around 15 ambulances a day in the conflict. So these specially designed armoured ambulances, better able to resist gunfire and explosions, have never been more urgently needed.
At the very least, the Russians have been indiscriminate in their targeting. But many Ukrainians claim their medics have, in some instances, been deliberately targeted. Earlier this month, this former NHS ambulance was badly damaged by shell fire outside a hospital in southern Ukraine. The loss of ambulances has forced locals to use completely unsuitable vehicles to transport the injured.
An ambulance is a good piece of kit and it's designed to do its job, but take away that infrastructure, take away the safety and add in maybe sniper fire and maybe close-on explosions and the rugged terrain of a conflict zone, and you've now got the perfect vehicle to do that.
Conservative MP Andrew Percy, a community first responder with the ambulance service, helped shape the idea of giving these ex-military vehicles a new lease of life.
They were all in their battle, army green with the cam webbing on it, the camouflage webbing, and they had the spent shells. So these vehicles have seen action in Afghanistan, surplus to requirements, and now being reprofiled in this way. And they are sadly needed. The fact that you need to have armoured ambulances is in itself a bit sad, really. It speaks to the aggression with which the Russians are attacking Ukraine.
Every day, more of these ambulances roll out of this plant en route to Ukraine. Private donations and government grants should ensure dozens more are converted and sent off in the weeks ahead. Mark White, GB News, Goole in East Yorkshire.
Delighted to say that Mark is with us in the studio. Mark, this is quite extraordinary. Good news story in many regards, but a reflection of the damage that's been inflicted upon Ukraine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And these vehicles really are ideally suited for operating in that kind of terrain because they're not going through often normal streets that we cleared of debris. These are going through conflict zones where buildings have been destroyed, streets are rubble strewn. So these big vehicles with their chunky wheels and big robust chassis and of course the armour can get into these areas where the conflict is raging, pick up those sadly who've been hurt in that conflict and get them out of there. The NHS ambulances, about 20 have gone across from the UK so far. More are going to be on their way. Old surplus NHS ambulances are welcome, but they're just not really up to the task.
And we were just talking there, weren't we, while your report was playing out about how, and understandably so, because obviously propaganda and information is really quite key in war, but we haven't really got a sense of how hammered Ukraine has been in the sense of losing troops and civilians. But there is no doubt that this has been a very, very costly war. I mean, you only have to look at images like this to demonstrate what a hammering Ukraine has taken.
Yes, and it's in so many different areas. Towns that we've never heard of, small little towns and villages in especially the east and the northeast, the south of Ukraine, even in areas to the north of the capital Kyiv as well. Lots of areas that have suffered immense damage, huge numbers of casualties. That cost will probably only be properly established, properly accounted for when the Ukrainians end the conflict with Russia and they can actually do a proper accounting for all of the losses that they've suffered, all the damage that's been inflicted.
And we're going to hear from Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, later on tonight, keynote speech in the city. And what we've seen, actually, kind of, haven't we, not just from the British, but also from the Americans as well, is that they're prepared to do more, that the kind of war aims now seem to have changed to actually not just kind of helping protect Ukraine, but potentially even helping Ukraine to win, and additionally to also to degrade Russia, so that, as I think Anthony Blinken or the US Defence Secretary, I can't remember which one, put it at the weekend, that Russia cannot do this again.
There is no doubt there is a shift, and many allies now of Ukraine are determined to go further than the initial military aid, lethal aid, which was small arms, anti-tank missile systems. That has been steadily increased in terms of the lethality of the types of equipment that's going across there, to anti-air systems now. Now they're sending bigger artillery pieces in, and tanks and armoured vehicles. And all of the while, of course, we're getting increasingly bellicose language from Moscow, threatening, of course, as they do from
I saw reports they might be nuking Britain.
Yeah, I mean, but, you know, what do they do? And I think this is what Liz Truss, as well, in her speech, is going to absolutely make clear. You cannot allow this aggressive, bullying, bellicose language from the likes of Moscow to put us off in the country and elsewhere around the globe from helping Ukraine. It's a must-win, I think, for Western allies. They see a very, very concerning and worrying future if Moscow is to prevail here and to wipe out effectively the Ukrainian government. That's why you're seeing now increasing numbers of friends, of allies of Ukraine coming forward, and they're more willing to send in bigger, heavier equipment despite the concerns that Russia is voicing.
OK, Mark, as always, really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor there, Mark White, in the studio. Let's stay with this issue because we're going to Germany. Major U-turn there. The government has announced it is going to send a fleet of around 50 anti-aircraft systems to Ukraine as it attempts to offset criticism that it's been too slow to provide military equipment to the country. Yesterday, the German government pledged to send anti-aircraft systems for the first time since the conflict started. It marks a huge shift in German foreign policy. Let's speak to Thomas Barrow, who is in Berlin for us. As always, Thomas, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It almost feels, from the outside at least, that the German government were kind of shamed into this move. I mean, there certainly have been toing and froing over the last week or so.
The German government has been criticised for a very long time now, actually since the war began, on different grounds. The latest, the German government's reluctance to send heavy weapons to Ukraine. And if you ask experts here in Berlin, they say that the German government has been very reluctant and is only basically acting when pressure is too high and when they have no other alternative but to act. If you believe this argument, you will understand to a large extent why the government, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, actually decided to deliver, or at least to approve the delivery of those anti-aircraft tanks. It is a big shift here in Germany because for a long time now, the German government had actually refused to do so. There were different arguments that were brought to explain that reluctance, practical arguments saying that Germany did not have those tanks in its own stock, that the Ukrainian soldiers would need some specific training to use them, or even further arguments saying that Germany did not want to become a party to the conflict. But pressure simply grew to such an extent that the government had no alternative but to really announce the delivery of those tanks. And it was announced actually at a time when the US was leading a very big meeting at a military base here in Germany. So at a time when allies beyond Germany as well are really committing to helping Ukraine even further.
Let's talk then about oil and gas, because that's the other big issue today, isn't it? With essentially Russia deciding to cut off Bulgaria and Poland from its gas supplies, could have really big implications, not least of all for Bulgaria, which is very heavily reliant on Russian gas. But the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen today suggesting that the EU is willing to help out. But the problem, of course, is that Russia could go further in countries like Germany off as well.
Obviously, and that's why Germany is particularly concerned about this. Not only Germany, but if you look, for example, at Austria, Austria also has a considerable dependence on Russian gas, and as such, they are following very closely what is happening now in Poland and Bulgaria. At the same time, the German government, in particular the German Vice Chancellor and Climate Minister Robert Habeck, has been trying in the last few weeks to reduce Germany's dependence not only on Russian gas, but also on Russian coal and on Russian oil. He was in Poland very recently trying to see if Germany could work hand in hand with Poland if, for example, Russia does cut supplies also to Germany. So Germany is very much aware that there's a possibility that Germany could be affected by these decisions in Moscow. Yet at the same time, Germany is trying to diversify its energy sources. So if this happens, if this does happen, Germany is not as badly affected as, let's say, a few weeks ago or a few months ago. That said, there is still growing criticism here in Germany when it comes to its dependence on Russian energy. That not only affects the current government, but it also affects previous governments here in Germany, not only Angela Merkel as former chancellor, but also Gerhard Schröder, also a former chancellor who is also a gas lobbyist working very closely with Russia.
And just very finally, Thomas, and quickly if you can, it comes, though, as there are suggestions that some oil companies are potentially in breach of the sanctions, that they are paying for oil and gas in rubles. I think even in Germany too.
Germany, and in particular Olaf Scholz, stressed when this story first came out that Russia wanted to have all these energy deliveries paid in rubles. The German government was clearly against that decision, and they stressed that they would continue to pay in euros because the contracts that were signed for Germany to pay in euros. And at the time, Olaf Scholz stressed that he had reached an agreement with Russian authorities to continue paying in euros. So we haven't heard to the contrary in this regard. And what we have heard is also support from the European level, in particular from Mrs. von der Leyen, when it comes to these deliveries, saying that there will be a coordinated response at a European level, and as such, that contracts should be respected in the way that they were signed.
Thomas, great analysis as ever. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from Berlin. Thomas Sparrow there. Now let's end the programme on taxation, because the Treasury collected £718 billion in taxes last year. That's the highest ever, and up almost a quarter on the year before. Income tax, national insurance, inheritance and capital gains tax have all hit record highs, with tax receipts as a proportion of GDP now standing at 30%. The news, of course, puts pressure on the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who, despite claiming he believes in low taxes, has put Britain on course for the highest tax burden since the end of the Second World War. Let's bring in the Taxpayers Alliance's Daniela Boxall, who joins us down the line. Daniela, thank you for joining us here on GB News. I'm sure the Chancellor will come on and say, well, we need more tax revenue, given the scale of the country's debts.
Yeah, and that is right. I mean, the debt interest payments have gone up, and they've gone up to a record level, but they've only gone up by about £31 billion, whereas the increase in the tax take has been over £134 billion. So there's definitely a lot of wiggle room there for the Chancellor to introduce some tax cuts. And yeah, it's absolutely right what you're saying there. The tax take has reached an astronomical high, and mainly that's because of these stealth taxes. So, you know, everybody this week will have seen in their pay packets, if they've got them this week, that the national insurance increase has come into effect. Now, a lot of people will see that, and that will make them quite angry. But what they might not realise is that, you know, with the freezing of income tax and other thresholds as well, that means that effectively the Chancellor is taking more money from them without them realising. So that's why we call these things a stealth tax. And, you know, with inflation going up, with the cost of living crisis at the moment, I think it's really important that families have more money in their back pockets to protect them from this crisis, and, you know, really shore up families during such a sort of, you know, a difficult time.
Well, but isn't that also part of the problem? Is that at this very moment in time, the people out there want the government to do more. They want the government to tackle the cost of living crisis, which in the end also means spending more money.
Yeah, but you can look at it in two ways, Darren. I mean, it's not necessarily the case that the cost of living crisis is purely driven by increase in prices. We're also seeing increase in taxes. So, you know, that's going to take away from people's incomes at the end of the day as well. So by cutting taxes, that's going to leave people with a lot more money to spend. So it is going to help them with the cost of living crisis as well.
What is the kind of solution to all of this then? Is it simply kind of cutting taxes, as in to give people back? Because the problem for the Conservative Party, where they found themselves, if you view it as a problem, is that lots of their core supporters kind of do believe in a bigger state. They do believe that the government should be funding the National Health Service properly and social care properly. They do want to see money spent on things like roads and public transport, i.e. their electoral base at the moment, largely in the red wall, quite like higher taxation, particularly on wealthy people, to help pay for this. So the Conservative Party's kind of electoral base is not necessarily a tax-cutting one.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, we've done polling which shows that working class voters on the majority, they prefer tax cuts. They want to see tax cuts being introduced because they're the people that are really impacted by rising taxes. I mean, take the income tax lower threshold at £12,500. That should be increasing to at least £14,000 by the end of 2026, which is when the end of the freeze is being when the freeze ends. So, you know, these people are really going to be impacted by that. It's going to impact the average household by over £400 a year. So this is a lot of money that people could be using to help them in the cost of living crisis. And it's not necessarily the case that they want to see all this investment going into, you know, the NHS, roads, etc. Of course, everybody wants that. But by the same token, you've got to see cuts in other places. You've got to see efficiency dividends because at the moment there is way too much waste in the public sector. And I think that's what really the Conservative Party needs to be looking at if they're going to be efficient going forward and actually focusing money on what people want them to be spent on, which is core public services.
OK. Daniela, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Daniela Boxall there from the Taxpayers Alliance. Just let's end on some of your views. People getting in touch today about a whole range of issues. Barrington says, do I understand that in Parliament today, Angela Rayner's legs were more important than Russia threatening the UK? I'd like to have seen the UK's preparation on this threat. Sue says it's hypocritical of Labour to keep bringing up Rishi Sunak's wife's tax arrangements. She's done nothing illegal. They say that she's not keeping within the spirit of law because of her husband's position. And Lynn says it is going to be difficult for everyone. Unfortunately, this is in the cost of living crisis. Unfortunately, due to the change in how people manage the finances, many are not ready for difficult times ahead. GB Views at gbnews.uk. That's it from me for today. Colin Brazier's up next. I'll see you tomorrow. Here's the weather.
Hello again, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another dry day for the vast majority tomorrow and another pretty chilly start as well as temperatures overnight tonight again drop down to freezing in places. High pressure is controlling our weather. It's been drifting down from the north, bringing with it cool air, and the winds coming in from the North Sea continuing to feed in quite a lot of cloud across the eastern parts of England in particular. Cloud breaking up a little bit through this evening, so many places having some sunny spells, and as I say, most places will be dry. But then later in the night, we could well start to see more cloud coming back across eastern parts of England. That will help to keep the temperatures up, but where we've got clear skies over Scotland, northern England, North Wales, certainly a frost in rural areas. Temperatures could be as low as -3 or -4, down to 2 or 3 degrees in most towns and cities. So a chilly start to Thursday, but again, for many western areas, a dry and a bright day. Lots of cloud again over the Midlands and eastern England, and for some here it could stay fairly gloomy all day. Thicker cloud might just bring 1 or 2 scattered showers over northern Scotland at times, but say most places looking dry with some sunshine in the south and west, 16, 17, Cardiff, Southampton, but under the cloudier skies, Hull and Norwich struggling to get much beyond double digits. During Thursday evening, still 1 or 2 showers over northern Scotland, but for most it's dry, and again we'll see the cloud breaking up to reveal clear spells. So again, a touch of frost is possible on Friday morning. And Friday's a similar story, perhaps a bit more cloud over northern and eastern Scotland with 1 or 2 scattered showers, a bit more cloud across southeast England, but for many central and western parts it's dry and fine on Friday with some good spells of sunshine and temperatures responding to that sun. It feels pleasant in the sunshine, with highs in the mid-teens. High pressure continues to dominate into the weekend. We're likely to see some showers in the far northwest on Saturday, but still for much of the UK, high pressure will bring fine weather on Saturday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides.